Hi folks, so I'm trying something new tonight. As you can probably figure out for the past few weeks that I really don't like showing my face on camera, but here I am, so this is going to be new for me. While I'm filming this tonight, I hope that you're enjoying your night and at least getting some rest on this very chilly, rainy fall night, which for me, are some of my favorites. But what I wanted to do for this lesson is, especially for the remote students, is discuss with you what I've been discussing with my in-class students, because when you did the Nearpod on We the People, I read over the answers, and I haven't graded it yet because I wanted to look at the answers first, and so many of you are on the verge of getting there, but I think, it's like the problem of remote, right? Sometimes we do have to be in class to, figure out exactly what we need to do, so I'm hoping this lesson will help you with that. I will try to be as quick as I can, but, as you're getting to know me too, there's nothing quick about me, so we'll see how this goes. So when you did your Nearpod, the learning target that you had was that you can weigh who is included in this phrase, we the people, right? This phrase that was written back in 1787, and trying to figure out what they meant, because we always assume, what it means and take it for granted. And one of the things with this course, if you haven't noticed already, is that we are going to have honest conversations about the United States. Not because we want to tear the United States down, but in order to make our country better, we have to be able to acknowledge certain things and speak truer when it comes to our history. So a big vocab word, right, that you will hear me use in this class often, is what does it mean to weigh something in this class? And again, when I mean weigh, I'm talking about what are you doing in your head, right? So to weigh in my class means you're looking at evidence, you're looking at details, you're looking at information, or even class discussions, and you're carefully comparing that evidence so that you can arrive to some type of judgment or decision. Now, in this lesson, what you're doing is we're trying to decide again, who is the we in the United States, right? Not who it should be, but who does society treat as we? And another way you could consider that question is the groups that you're going to look at in these pictures. Do these groups have the same power, the same voice, the same access, not just to their rights, but the same access to wealth and education that's been promised in the Constitution? Now, when I looked at the over the answers, everybody who did the assignment, was clearly looking at the images, but there was probably one part that, I didn't emphasize enough, and that's the idea of comparing. So what I'm going to do is walk you through these images to give you a clue of what we discussed in class, kind of ways to think about things, think about things a little differently. So when you look at this image, what do we have here? Well, we have a group of white men. And yes, these white men are all members of Congress, so of course that gives them, more say in government because of their job. But what I want you to think about is, if let's say I took the suits off these men and put these men in another type of workspace, made them construction workers, maybe put them all at a barbecue, right? The point is that as white men, right, they do have a lot of power, and they do have a lot of access to their rights and access to wealth, right? Now, it's just one image, so we have nothing to compare it to. So we need some more groups to compare to before we could finally flesh out exactly where this lesson is going. So when you look at the second group, right, here we have black children. Now, some students in class said African American, but remember, not every black person in this country is necessarily from America. You have Afro-Caribbean, and, African American refers to people whose ancestry traces back to, obviously, Africa, but, they were enslaved and forced here So that would be African American. So we can say that all these, children are black, but whether they're African American or maybe West Indian, that we don't know. And notice too, we see both boys and girls. Now, if we ask ourselves the question, do black people, are they considered we the people by society, right? Well, a student said it today very perfectly. The student brought up Black Lives Matter, and that was such a great piece of evidence, because if black people were treated as we the people, the way they should be, then there wouldn't be a need for a Black Lives Matter movement or a civil rights movement. So the very fact that those movements exist, the fact that these groups, whether it was Black Lives Matter today or the civil rights groups in the 1960s, and all the black people, abolitionists, who have always, right, pushed for equal rights, that tells you right there that no, they have not been treated the same. And now when we compare it to, right, these white men, we know that, black people are not seen as we as these men are, right? But again, we need more to compare. So in our next image, right, we have a group of white women here. And this is where the comparison really begins, right? Because if you ask, like, well, are white women, we the people? Well, we know that white women don't have the same power and access as white men, right? But at the same time, we know that white women have more say and more power than both black men and black women. So if you notice, it's almost like starting to form a pyramid, kind of. Not everybody's on the same level in terms of the way society treats it, right? Now, if we go from the white women to now these images, right? Here we have black women. But, as students said today, what do you notice about these black women? Well, you have different shades of black women. So you have light-skinned black women, brown women, darker-skinned black women. And the students notice that, well, if you look on the right, like, these are all celebrities. Black women who have a lot of power, and like, what do they all have in common? They're all light skin, right? And if you think of the TV shows you watch, the movies you watch, when you how often do dark-skinned black women get roles compared to light-skinned black women? And what you start to realize is that the lighter the skin, the more power and access you have, the more acceptable you are seen as, the more we, so to speak. But then if we compare, right, and go back, we would say even a light-skinned black woman doesn't get the same power and access as white women. And again, they also certainly do not have the same power and access in society as white men. So moving on now from our, shades of black women, right? Here we have images from the New York City Gay Pride Parade, right? Now, when we look at these images on the right, we see a gay white man. And when we look at the images on the left, we see a more diverse group of gay people. We see, black black male gay people, and we see a man from East Asia who is gay. And when we break this down, if we're talking about just gay people overall as a group, do they have the same power and access to their rights as heterosexual people? No. I mean, they recently, a few years ago, but that's still recent, got the right to marry, legally. And now there's an attempt to strip some of those rights away. So it's like you gain rights, and now there's an attempt to, take those rights away so quickly. But if we're comparing the two images here, right, we would have to acknowledge that, the white gay man probably has more power and access and rights than the black gay man, right? So even within gay people, there's division, right? The whiter you are, the more we you are seen. That doesn't mean the same we is the white males in the first picture, but again, a white gay man is often treated better than a black gay man, and a black gay man is often maybe treated than a black gay woman sometimes. In our next image, we have Native Americans. And this, I would say this series of images led to a lot of discussion in class, right? Because Native Americans have a whole other set of issues to deal with. Because there's been an attempt in this country to erase them from our country's past. Because remember, the United States was a conquering nation. Their lands were conquered. And if you talk about, their ancestry to the land, you can't talk about that without acknowledging the genocides that took place. So, it's either you talk about it and take responsibility as a country, or you try to erase it. So, if you think about it, like comparing Native Americans to, the images of black people we saw earlier, you do not learn a lot of black history, right? If we're being honest, schools do not teach you enough, and they need to teach a lot more. At the same time, though, we do talk about black history every now and then, or, black people are talked about in media and black issues. But if you think about it, and students acknowledge, we don't talk about Native Americans. You don't learn about them often. They aren't mentioned in news because, again, there's an attempt to erase them. So, many students were unsure, because on the one hand, black people are getting murdered by, white supremacists and, murdered by police officers. And then on the other hand, you have Native Americans who were murdered in the past, and now they're just erased, and it's like, which one is worse? And I don't think we can measure it as which is worse. They're both horrific, right? But there's no doubt that Native Americans are not seen as we, right? Our next image. Oh, sorry, it's a quick video. Our next image now we have Arabs, American Muslims. And the reason I separate the two is because one conversation that we had in class is how it's interesting with people from the Middle East because people always assume that they are Muslim. Well, first of all, yes, there are a lot of Muslims in the Middle East, but there are also Christians. There are also Middle Eastern Jews, right? And there are people from the Middle East who don't identify with any religion, right? So it's interesting how with people from the Middle East, we always in this country tend to stamp the word Muslim on them, even if they don't even believe in religion. But there's no doubt, as the students said, that American Muslims or people from the Middle East, they are often treated as not American at all. In other words, at least with African Americans, right? There's a recognition that yes, they are here, right? But with American Muslims or people from the Middle East, they're kind of always treated like foreigners, right? They're always seen through the prism of religion, and they and let's face it, many often get the word terrorism stamped on them, when in reality white terrorism has always plagued this country more so than any other group in the nation, and students agreed, that again, American Muslims, people from the Middle East are not, the society does not treat them as we, the people, unfortunately. And then just a quick anecdote before moving on. The very day that I did this lesson last year, one of my students, she came in and, she was upset and she wore a hijab, and she had said how when she got on the bus, she sat down and, the mother took her children and moved away from her, and then another person on the bus called her a terrorist. Right? And this is how the student, started her day. So you have to imagine how painful that is. And, when that happens, how do you feel like a we, right? When people look at you like that. In this next group, we have transgendered women. So these were people who were born as male and they became female. The actress in the middle, right? She's in the show Orange Is the New Black, and the actresses on the right, they're in the show Pose, right? So again, it's like in this country, definitely not seen as we. But then if you take like gay people and transgender people, in a weird way, gay people are sometimes treated better than people who are transgendered. Transgender people, have a hard time fighting for their rights. Here in this image, we have Puerto Ricans, right? And if you remember from Hurricane Maria, the U.S. government didn't do much to help Puerto Rico. But isn't it we the people, right? Puerto Ricans are citizens. Shouldn't the government come to the aid of Puerto Rico during Hurricane Maria, since they are U.S. citizens and it's a U.S. Commonwealth territory? Well, it didn't seem so we the people at the time, because it took a lot of criticism for the government to finally help Puerto Rico. But then, when we think of Latin Americans, whether it's Puerto Ricans, Dominican Americans, etc., within the Latinx community, you also have Afro, Latino, and Latina, Black people within the Latin community. And, oftentimes there's huge discussions in the Latin community because, again, the lighter skin you are, the more you are seen as we, whereas, black skin Latin Americans, are not seen on the same level as other Latin Americans. And again, you see this division over and over. If you look at this slide, right, people with disabilities, do they have access to everywhere? Well, they don't. I mean, yes, you will see, signs for handicap parking, and on the subway, there's a space for handicap wheelchairs. But if it's we the people, shouldn't people with disabilities have access to everything everywhere, just like you do? You do in theory, right? But the point is, we don't. I mean, one of the things to think about when it comes to the outdoor dining, and why it's such a big deal during this pandemic, because of the outdoor dining, it allows people in wheelchairs to actually dine at a lot of restaurants, because believe it or not, a lot of restaurants still do not have wheelchair access, right? Think about sign language. Years ago, when I was growing up, very rarely would you see a sign interpreter at a speech or on TV. Do you see more of it today? Yes, you do, more of it. Do you see it everywhere? No, you don't. And imagine if, you're hearing impaired. Like, imagine what that's like when you go into a space where there is no interpreter, right? That could be a terrifying feeling. If we look at this image, right, here we have American Mexicans. Now, we the people, I mean, it's almost like the same as people from the Middle East, right? If you have the name Mexican stamped on you, in the United States you're viewed as an immigrant. But the irony is that most immigration from Latin America doesn't come from Mexico. A lot of it, at least the immigration from Central America, comes from places like El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, right? So it's, we have this image in the United States as all these Mexicans coming over the border, and most of them are not Mexican. So it's almost like we the people. Well, Mexicans are always seen as immigrants, even if their family has been here for over 100 years. Here we have queer, right? Queer, as I was describing to a class, if you think of like an umbrella, queer is the umbrella, and then like many of these like other, like transgendered, gay and stuff like that all fall within the realm of queer. But depending on which group you are, it depends on the access. Meaning, if you're gay, you might have more access, but then if you're transgendered, you don't, right? Or if you're sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But you understand the point that again, even within each group, right, not seen as we the people, but even within them, they're divided. Here we have, yes, that is Andrew Yang. He was running for president for the Democrats. That's him and his family. And Andrew Yang is from his family is from East Asia, and East Asian Americans, right? There's a lot of stereotypes. This is a weird one, right? Because are they seen as we the people? No, we-ish, kind of, in that the stereotype that East Asians are. We hear these stereotypes all the time. East Asians are good at math, and they're so smart, etc. And what's happened is that stereotype has helped like East Asians get a lot of access to colleges and things like that. But the point is, like, again, no matter what they do, they are still not viewed as white, and therefore they're not we. So while white people in the United States will see East Asians as a good group, right? They still don't see them as the we. And here we have Jewish people, right? So the image on the right, if you live in Brooklyn, you have Hasidic Jews, and then if you look on the left, you have what we call Orthodox, and if they don't wear the yarmulke at the top of the head, it'd be Reformed Jews. And the point is, like, again, it's like, how we are they? They're not treated the same we as white people, right? But then depending on which group of Jewish people you're a member of, are Hasidic Jews considered the same as Jewish people who don't wear any signs of Judaism on them, like the yarmulke? Probably not. They are not treated the same, right? Whereas Jews who don't dress wearing the yarmulke and things like that are probably seen as white, and people don't know them as Jewish. But then once they find out they're Jewish, does that mean they're treated the same way or not? And that was my last image, okay? So the point is, right, when you compare the images, Jewish people, East Asian people, queer, American Mexicans, people with disabilities, Afro, Latino, and Latina, Puerto Ricans, transgendered, American Muslims, and people from the Middle East, Native Americans, gay people, black women, white women, black people. None of them have the same power and access as white men. And to be honest, I could even split this image, right? Because I think we can all agree that if you're wealthy, white, and male, you have all the power, all the rights, all the access. And if you're poor, right, you don't have the same power and access as the white men, but still a poor white man is still going to have more power and access than a wealthy black man, right? So if you think of when they wrote the Constitution and they wrote that phrase, "we the people," what did that phrase really mean? Well, it really meant white, wealthy men, right? And what we need to do as a people, what we need to demand, is that phrase, "we the people," is extended to everyone. The power, the rights, the voice, right? That is the country that we have to keep demanding for, because for right now, for over 200 years, we the people has meant white men, right? And that's what we have to start challenging. So what you will do to end this lesson, I have not been looking at the timer, so in my head I'm imagining, I was just 15 minutes, so I apologize if I've gone over. You're going to practice that strategy that I taught you in the previous lesson, the because, but, so. So your kernel sentence is the preamble phrase, "we the people," should mean everyone. Oops, I'm sorry. So first, the preamble phrase, "we the people," should mean everyone because, and you'll finish that sentence. The preamble phrase, "we the people," should mean everyone but, where you're going to write an exception based on this lesson. And then the preamble phrase, "we the people," should mean everyone so. So you'll finish those three sentences just like you did in the previous lesson. I hope this clears things up if you were confused by that Nearpod lesson, and that you have a better idea of, the way, you should have been comparing the images. If you still have access to the Nearpod, please feel free to rework that final question, because like I said, I haven't graded yet. But now that you're like, oh, now I know what I want to write, please feel free to go back and do it. So I hope this cleared things out. If you have any questions, please always feel free to reach out and ask. And I hope you are all well and your families are safe and well. And I will talk to you soon, folks. Take care.